I used to think my life was simple. I was the kind of person who believed my family story the way a child believes in a bedtime tale, neatly told, no missing pages. My father, the strong but gentle man who worked hard, came home smelling of dust and sweat and still found the energy to lift me on his shoulders. My mother, the quiet force who held everything together with a soft voice and eyes that always saw more than she said. My big sister, protective and loud, the one who taught me how to fight back when kids in the neighborhood made fun of my name or my dark skin. We were not rich, but we were proud. We were close, or at least that is what I thought. If you had asked me a few years ago about my childhood, I would have told you it was good. I would have told you about Sunday mornings when my mother played old soul records while cooking, and my father hummed along off-key, pretending he knew the lyrics. I would have told you about family meetings where nobody left the table until every problem was discussed, often loudly, but always ending with some kind of joke, some kind of hug. I believed we were honest with each other. I believed we were the kind of family that did not hide. I was wrong. The day everything changed began with a funeral. My mother died on a rainy Wednesday. The sky was gray, the kind of heavy gray that sits low over the houses and makes the world feel smaller. The church was full, filled with women in dark dresses and headscarves, men in suits that smelled like mothballs and cologne. There were tears, of course, but also songs. In our community, we sing even when we are broken. The pastor said my mother was a woman of truth, a pillar, and I sat there in the front row, my hands clenched together, believing every word. It wasn't until after the burial, when the house became quiet, and the visitors finally left with their empty plates and kind words, that the silence began to feel different. My sister Layla moved through the living room picking up cups and tissues with a kind of robotic focus. My father sat in his usual chair, staring at the wall, a glass of water untouched in his hand. The house smelled like candles and sweat and sorrow. "Go rest," I told them. "I'll finish here." They were too tired to argue. Eventually, they disappeared into their rooms, leaving me alone with the mess and my thoughts. As I gathered plates from the dining table, my eyes fell on the hallway that led to my parents' bedroom. It felt wrong to think about cleaning in there, like stepping into sacred ground too soon, but something pulled me towards it, a quiet insistence in my chest that I couldn't shake. My parents' room was neat, just as my mother had left it. Her scarf still hung over the chair. Her small collection of perfume bottles sat untouched on the dresser, catching what little light slipped through the curtains. I stood there for a moment, breathing in the scent that still lingered, powder, jasmine, home. I told myself I was just going to dust, just tidy up a little. I opened the wardrobe to straighten the clothes people had disturbed while looking for jackets. That was when I saw the box. It was tucked in the back, behind a row of folded blankets. A simple wooden box, dark and old with a tiny brass latch. For a moment, I thought it might be something sentimental. Old jewelry, letters from when my parents were young. I smiled sadly, imagining love notes my father must have written badly and my mother kept anyway. But when I pulled it out, it felt heavier than I expected. Heavier than it looked, heavier than it should. I almost put it back. Something inside me whispered that it was not the right time, that grief could make people read too much into ordinary things. But another voice, quieter but stronger, told me this box was not meant to stay hidden forever. My mother was gone. Whatever she had locked away would outlive her silence. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened it. Inside, there were papers, old, yellowed at the edges, tied with a faded red ribbon. Underneath, there were photographs, their corners bent, their colors soft and tired. On top of everything, there was an envelope with my name on it. Not my son, not for my child. It had my name. To Malik. My hands started to shake. I stared at the envelope for a long moment. Suddenly, it felt like I was 12 again, standing in front of the principal's office, knowing I was about to hear something I didn't want to hear. I slipped my finger under the flap and broke the seal. The first thing I saw was my mother's handwriting. Familiar, careful. The letter began simply. "My son, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer there to tell you these words myself." I swallowed hard, my throat already tight. "I have carried this secret for a long time, longer than I should have. I wanted to protect you. I wanted to protect all of us. But the truth has a way of waiting. I know one day you will need to know who you really are." The words blurred as tears pushed into my eyes. Who you really are. For a second, I almost stopped reading. But some part of me knew that if I walked away now, the box would sit like a curse in the corner of my mind forever. So I wiped my eyes and forced myself to continue. I did not give birth to you, Malik. The room seemed to tilt. I am your mother in every way that matters. I watched your first steps, wiped your tears, prayed over you when you were sick, but my body is not where your life started. I am writing this because I love you, and you deserve to know where you come from, even if it means you hate me for a while. I realized I was shaking my head. No, I whispered into the empty room. No, no, no. My mother who had kissed my scraped knees, braided my hair when I was a boy, scolded me for staying out too late, was telling me I did not come from her. My chest tightened, my heartbeat pounding thick in my ears. I kept reading. You came to us when you were a baby. A few months old, you were already smiling, already trying to grab my earrings with your tiny fingers. The first time I held you, I knew God had placed you in my arms for a reason. But the story of how you came to us is not clean. It is covered in fear and mistakes and things I am not proud of. There was a name written on the next line, a woman's name I had never heard before. She is your mother by blood, my mom wrote, and we kept you from her. The words cut through me like a blade. We did not steal you, my mother added, as if she could hear the accusation already forming in my mind. At least not in the way you might think, but we made a choice that changed her life, your life, and mine. We told ourselves it was for the best. We told ourselves it was God's will. But I have asked myself for years if we were just hiding our selfishness behind his name. I looked up from the letter, my breathing shallow. The house felt different now. The walls that had held my childhood echoed with a new emptiness. I looked around the room, and for the first time in my life, I felt like a guest in it. I went back to the box. Beneath the letter, there were documents, a birth certificate with my first name, but not my last. A different surname, different parents listed. I flipped it over as if the paper itself was lying. There were more papers, legal ones, adoption agreements I had never known existed. One line struck me hard. Biological mother has visitation rights as mutually agreed between parties. Visitation rights. The room was spinning now. At the bottom of the box, under the papers, lay the photographs. The first one I picked up was of a young woman, maybe 20, with deep brown skin and tired but bright eyes. She stood in front of a simple building holding a baby in her arms. The baby's eyes were half closed, a slight smile on his face. Even as a baby, he looked like me. I felt my throat close. On the back of the photo, someone had written a date. Underneath it, in my mother's handwriting, were the words, "First visit." There were more photos. The same woman, sitting on our old sofa before we replaced it, holding me while I grabbed at her necklace. Another one of her and my father standing next to each other, not quite touching, their smiles strained. The last photo in the stack was different. It was creased down the middle, like it had been folded and unfolded 100 times. In it, the woman stood outside our gate, looking straight at the camera. Her eyes were wet, her hands were empty. On the back, in my mother's handwriting again, was a single line. She stopped coming after this. My heart felt like it was being pulled apart slowly. All my life, I thought my story started in this house, in this room, in my mother's arms. But now, holding those papers, those photos, I realized there was another house, another room, another pair of arms that were supposed to be mine. A woman I had never met had carried me, labored, cried out, and then somehow walked away with empty hands. Or had she walked away? I closed the box and pressed my palms against my eyes, trying to breathe. My family had hidden this from me, not just the fact that I was adopted, but that my biological mother had been here, in this house, in my living room, holding me, loving me. And then she was gone and nobody ever spoke her name again. If you've ever discovered something about yourself that shattered the story you believed your whole life, you probably know the feeling I had in that moment. It is like the floor disappears beneath your feet, like you are falling and there is nothing to grab onto. If this is hitting close to home, stay with me. And if stories like this resonate with you, you can subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapters we share here, because what I found in that box was only the beginning. The real storm was still coming. I don't know how long I sat there with that box in my lap. Minutes, hours. Grief has a way of bending time. All I remember is feeling hollow, like someone had reached inside my chest and scooped out everything I thought I was. My mother's scent still floated in the room, but the memory of it no longer comforted me the way it had an hour earlier. It felt like a ghost, something that belonged to someone else's story, not mine. Eventually, I stood up. My legs were unsteady, my throat dry, my hands ice cold. I needed answers, and the only person who could give them to me was still in this house. I found my father sitting on the edge of his bed, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor as if the grief had carved him into stone. He didn't look up when I entered. He didn't have to. The moment I stepped inside, he stiffened. Maybe he had heard the wooden box creak open earlier. Maybe he had felt the shift in the house. Or maybe guilt has a way of announcing itself even when no one speaks. "Dad," I said, my voice strange in my own ears. "We need to talk." He finally lifted his head. His eyes were red and swollen, but there was something else in them too, a flicker of dread. "What is it, Malik?" he asked quietly. I held up the envelope with my name on it. His face drained of color. It was all the confirmation I needed. "You knew," I said. "You knew my whole life." He closed his eyes and inhaled slowly, as if bracing himself for a blow. "I was going to tell you," he whispered. "When?" I snapped. "When I turn 50? When my own children start asking questions? When the woman who gave birth to me dies without ever seeing my face again?" He winced. The pain in his eyes was real, but so was mine. He gestured weakly toward the chair. "Sit down, son." "I'm not your son," I said before I could stop myself. The words tasted poisonous, and the moment they left my mouth, I regretted them. His face twisted, and he looked down at his hands like he was afraid they were shaking. "You are my son," he said firmly. "No matter what that box says, no matter what anyone says, I raised you, I fed you, I carried you on my shoulders until my back hurt. I taught you how to ride your first bike. You are my son." I swallowed hard. "But not by blood." "No," he admitted softly. "Not by blood." Something inside me sagged. Hearing him say it out loud hit me harder than reading it on paper. "Start from the beginning," I said, "and don't lie to me again." He nodded slowly, as if accepting his fate. "You were 3 months old when we first met you," he began. "You weren't supposed to be ours. You weren't supposed to even stay the night." He paused, running a tired hand over his face. "Your mother, your biological mother, came to us through a friend of the family. She was struggling, no job, no stable home. She had been kicked out by the child's father's family. She had nowhere to go. Your mother, your adoptive mother, opened our doors to her. She stayed here for a few weeks while we helped her get on her feet." I looked around the room, seeing it suddenly differently. My biological mother had slept here, lived here, eaten at our table, while I never even knew she existed. "She was young," my father continued, "barely 20, and she was drowning. We didn't judge her. Your mother loved helping people. She made space for her, bought diapers, made her food, encouraged her, and little by little, she healed." He swallowed thickly. "But then she met someone, a man. He seemed kind at first, promised to take care of her, promised he would accept the baby. They planned to leave the city together, start fresh." He paused again. His voice trembled. "They left one evening while I was at work. She said she would bring the baby back for a goodbye visit before traveling, but 2 days passed, then a week, no one heard from her." My chest tightened. "And then one morning," he said quietly, "your mother opened the front door and found you there, in a small basket, a blanket wrapped around you, and a note." I felt my heart drop. "What did it say?" I whispered. He looked up at me with eyes full of regret. It said, "Please give him a life I can't. Please love him. Please don't look for me." My stomach twisted. My breath hitched in my throat. "You're lying," I said again, though this time it sounded more like I was begging the universe to prove me wrong. He shook his head slowly. "I'm not." "So she abandoned me," I whispered, the words slicing me from the inside. He leaned forward. "Malik, listen, your biological mother was broken. She loved you. She didn't know how to be what you needed. She made a choice she thought was mercy." My hands trembled. Mercy was not the word I would have used. "But why hide all of this?" I asked sharply. "Why keep the truth from me?" He looked away for a moment, then back at me. "We tried to find her," he said. "Your mother spent months searching, calling shelters, asking around, going to neighborhoods we had no business walking into. But the woman had disappeared. No records, no forwarding address, nothing. After a year, we realized we needed to move forward, and then your mother got scared." "Scared of what?" "Scared that if you knew the truth, you would hate us," he said. "Scared you'd go looking for her. Scared you'd be hurt again." "She didn't trust me enough to tell me," I said softly. "She didn't trust herself enough," he answered. I looked down at the floor, feeling the weight of everything pressing against my ribs. Why did she stop coming? I asked. The woman in the pictures. Why did she stop visiting? My father hesitated. She came for 6 months, he said slowly. Every week, always alone, she would sit with you for an hour, sometimes 2. She loved you. Anyone could see that. My heart squeezed tightly. But every visit broke her, he whispered. Every time she held you, it reminded her of what she had lost, what she had given up, and every time she left, she would cry. She told your mother once that she felt like she was dying slowly. I swallowed like my throat was full of stones. So she left because she loved me? I said, my voice cracking. She left because staying hurt her more than leaving, he said gently. She didn't know who she was without you, but she didn't know how to live with you either. A silence fell between us that felt too big for the room. Eventually I stood. I need to find her, I said quietly. My father nodded, though pain flickered across his face. I thought you would. She deserves to know I'm alive, I continued. She deserves to see who I became. He hesitated before speaking again. Malik, there's more. My stomach twisted. What more? I asked. He opened the drawer of his nightstand and pulled out a small, worn notebook. He held it out to me with trembling hands. She kept this, he said, during the months she visited. After she stopped coming, she asked us to hold on to it, just in case. I stared at the notebook. The cover was cracked, the edges frayed. It looked like it carried weight it wasn't built to hold. Why didn't you give this to me? I whispered. We thought you'd find it when you were older, he said. We didn't expect your mother to go before she had the chance to tell you everything. My chest tightened again. I took the notebook in my hands. It felt warm, as if someone had been holding it minutes ago. I opened it. The first page had my name written in careful, shaky handwriting. Under it, a single sentence. The world may not have room for me, but it must have room for you. My vision blurred again. Each page was a mixture of letters, tiny journal entries, small sketches, my infant hand, my sleeping face, an outline of me wrapped in blankets, notes about my first sounds, words she hoped I would learn, fears she had for me, dreams she prayed I would fulfill. It was like reading the soul of a stranger who loved me before I took my first breath. When I finished the last page, I realized my father had been watching me the entire time. His eyes were soft, exhausted. Your mother, your adoptive mother, wanted to give this to you on your 18th birthday, he said. But you were applying to university. She didn't want to overwhelm you. Then she kept waiting and waiting, and hiding became easier than explaining. I sat there for a long moment, the notebook pressed to my chest. Then something shifted inside me, not anger, not grief, something calmer, not forgiveness, not yet, but clarity. I have to find her, I said again. I know, my father replied, and when I do, everything will change. He nodded. Yes, it will. I stood and walked toward the door. Before leaving the room, I looked over my shoulder. Dad? Yes? I don't hate you. He closed his eyes. Tears slipped down his cheeks. I know you don't, he whispered. I walked out before the moment broke me completely. You know, sometimes the truth cuts so deep it leaves you with scars you don't even understand yet. If you've ever found out something about your family that shook your world, you probably know how I felt walking out of that room. And if this story is resonating with you, you're welcome to stay with me on this journey. There's much more ahead. If you feel connected to stories like this, you can subscribe and walk with us through the next chapters we tell. Because what happened next changed everything again. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to a house that suddenly felt unfamiliar. Every tick of the clock reminded me that my life had split in two, the life I thought I had and the life I actually lived. My mother's letter, my father's confession, that notebook, they played over and over in my mind like scenes from a movie I wasn't ready to watch but couldn't turn away from. Around 4 a.m, I got up and sat by the window. The streets were empty. The sky was peeling from black to blue. Birds were just waking up, their soft calls drifting through the neighborhood. It was strange how the world kept moving, even when mine had stopped. I kept thinking about her, my biological mother, a woman who had held me with trembling hands, a woman who had loved me so fiercely that leaving me tore her apart, a woman who had stood at our gate one last time before disappearing. Where was she now, and why had she never come back? By the time the sun rose, my chest hurt from holding everything inside. I needed to move. I needed direction. I needed answers. The first place I went was the friend of the family my father mentioned, the one who had brought her to our house all those years ago, Auntie Miriam. She wasn't really my aunt, but she had been around since I was born, or apparently since I arrived. She lived 2 streets away, in a small yellow house with peeling paint and a garden full of plants she spoke to like grandchildren. When I knocked on her door, she opened it wearing a headscarf and an oversized t-shirt. "Malik?" she said, blinking in surprise. "It's barely 8. What's wrong?" I didn't answer, not verbally. I just held up the notebook. Her expression changed immediately. Her shoulders dropped. She stepped aside and quietly said, "Come in." Inside, the smell of ginger tea and fried dough filled the air. A radio played old songs in the background. I stood in the middle of her living room, unable to sit, unable to breathe properly. "You know," I said. It wasn't a question. She sighed deeply and nodded. "Your parents came to me when it happened. When she first left you on the doorstep. They didn't know what to do. They were heartbroken and terrified." "What did she tell you?" I asked. "That she had tried," Auntie Miriam said softly. "That she had wanted to be strong. But the world wasn't kind to her. She was alone, and she didn't want you to grow up in the chaos she was living. She abandoned me," I whispered again, the words bitter. "She thought she was saving you," she said gently. I looked away, jaw clenched. "That doesn't make it hurt less." "I know," she replied. "And I'm sorry, you deserved better. You deserved the truth." "Where is she now?" I asked. Auntie Miriam shook her head. "She disappeared. She didn't leave an address. Didn't take her phone. Didn't tell anyone where she was going." "Someone must know something," I insisted. "A friend, a relative, a neighbor." "She didn't have relatives here," she said. "She came from a rural village. She didn't speak much about her past. She carried pain like armor." Her voice grew softer. "The last time I saw her, she looked like a shadow, like someone who had run out of places to run." I felt something collapse inside me. "So that's it? She's just gone?" "Not gone," she said firmly. "People don't vanish, not entirely. They leave traces, footprints, stories. Someone knows where she went." Her words lit something in me again, a spark, a direction. "Tell me everything," I said. She made tea for both of us and sat across from me. As she spoke, I tried to piece together the fragments of a woman I had never known, her height, her soft smile, the way she laughed when I tried to pull her earrings, how she would hum when she rocked me, her fear of the man she had been involved with, her hope for something better and something else. "She asked about you every visit," Auntie Miriam said. "She always asked if you were eating well, sleeping well, smiling. She asked if you were safe." "Then why didn't she stay?" I whispered. "Because she didn't feel worthy," she answered. "She thought she had already failed you." I pressed my hands over my face. The pain of it was suffocating. "Do you know her name?" I asked quietly. She nodded. "I remember her first name. That was something, a thread to pull on." "What about where she lived?" I pressed. "A small housing compound on the east side," she said. "But it was demolished years ago. They built apartments there now. A dead end." "Do you know anyone she spoke to? A co-worker? A neighbor?" "She worked briefly at a garment factory," she said. "I doubt any of the workers from back then are still there, but it's a place to start." So I wrote down every detail she gave me, every scrap, every half memory, every tiny clue. It wasn't much, but it was more than I had that morning. When I reached the door to leave, she grabbed my hand. "Malik," she said softly, "whatever you find, remember this. You were loved, not perfectly, not consistently, but deeply. That woman carried you with hope, and she let you go with heartbreak." Her words stayed with me as I walked back to my car. Finding her wasn't just about truth anymore. It was about healing a wound I didn't even know existed until yesterday. I spent the next days searching. The factory had moved locations. The new manager had no idea who worked there 23 years ago. I spoke to older workers, men and women who had been there long enough to recall a young girl with sad eyes and a baby she loved too much. but none of them knew where she went. Still, I refused to stop. I took the bus to the old neighborhood where her housing compound once stood. New buildings towered over freshly paved sidewalks. Children played soccer in places where rusted metal shacks once stood. The past had been erased, yet I wandered, imagining her footsteps on dirt roads that no longer existed. At the edge of the compound, I saw an elderly man tending a small flower stall. Something told me to ask him. "Excuse me," I said, "did you live here before?" He studied me for a moment, his gaze sharp despite his age. "Maybe," he said, "depends on who's asking." I took a deep breath. "I'm looking for a woman who lived here decades ago. She had a baby, a boy." His eyes narrowed. "You her boy?" My heart stumbled. "I think so," I said. He exhaled slowly, then pointed at a bench nearby. "Sit! Old bones can't stand and talk long." I sat. He sat beside me, wiping sweat from his forehead with a cloth. "She was quiet," he said. "Kept to herself, worked hard, loved that baby like her life depended on it." My throat tightened. "Do you know what happened to her?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "One day she left with the baby, then came back days later, without him. She cried for hours, never told anyone what happened. After that, she was different, like the wind had blown the soul out of her." I swallowed. "Where did she go after?" "Far," he said. "Someplace quieter. Said she needed to find God again." "Do you know where?" He hesitated, then said something that chilled me. "She didn't go alone." "What do you mean?" "She left with a church group. They helped women in trouble. They took her in." A church group. A place for women in crisis. That was something. "Do you know the name?" I asked. He squinted as if digging through decades in his mind. "House of Grace," he said. "Up north. Old mission building. They still run programs there." Hope surged through me like a heartbeat. I stood immediately. "Thank you. Thank you so much." As I turned to leave, he called out, "Boy?" I paused. "When you find her, don't judge her first. Listen." His words followed me all the way to my car. That night, I didn't tell my father or my sister where I had been. I needed time, I needed quiet, and I needed strength. I sat alone in my room with the notebook in my hands, reading the last page again and again until the words burned into me. The world must have room for you. The next morning, before the sun rose, I packed a small bag, filled my car with gas, and set off toward the northern countryside, toward House of Grace, toward the woman who had given me life, and toward a truth that would shake me once again. The road to the north was long and quiet. Miles of open land stretched ahead of me, broken only by clusters of trees and the occasional old farmhouse leaning against the wind like it had lived too many lives. I kept one hand on the steering wheel and the other on the notebook resting in the passenger seat, as if touching it could somehow guide me. My mother's handwriting felt like an echo of who I was supposed to be, and a reminder of how little I knew about who I truly was. As the city faded behind me, the air changed. It felt lighter somehow, as if the truth I was chasing existed only in places untouched by noise. I kept thinking about what I would say when I finally saw her, if she was even there. What did someone say to the woman who brought them into the world and then disappeared? Was it anger, gratitude, something in between? I had replayed that moment in my head all night, but every version left me feeling unprepared. Hours passed before I finally saw the sign by the side of a dusty road, House of Grace Women's Mission. The paint was peeling, the wood faded from sun and rain. The building itself stood back from the road, made of old stone, surrounded by tall grass swaying in the wind. It looked tired, like a place where broken people went to rest. As I parked and stepped out, the quietness hit me first, the kind of stillness that makes your heart beat louder than your footsteps. I walked toward the front door, each step heavier than the last. By the time I reached the entrance, my palms were sweating. I knocked. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the door opened and a tall woman in her 60s stood there wearing a gray shawl and kind eyes that seemed to see straight through people. "Good morning," she said. "How can I help you?" I cleared my throat. I'm looking for someone, or information about someone who might have stayed here." Her expression shifted, curiosity mixed with caution. "What's her name, dear?" I said the name slowly, as if speaking it too loudly might break something. The woman's eyes widened just slightly, the smallest reaction but enough to make my heart pound. I remember her, she said quietly. A wave of emotion surged through me, relief, fear, hope, panic, everything mixed together like a storm. She came here many years ago, the woman continued, broken, silent, carrying a grief she didn't have words for. My throat tightened. Do you know where she is now? She looked at me for a long moment before answering. Come inside. The hall smelled of old books, soap, and lavender. A few women were seated at a round table, folding laundry and talking softly. They glanced up when I passed, but their eyes held no judgment, just the quiet understanding of people who had carried secrets too heavy for ordinary conversations. The woman led me into a small office and closed the door. I can tell you what I know, she said gently, but I need to understand. Who are you to her? I hesitated. Then I pulled the notebook from my bag and placed it on her desk. I'm her son. Her breath caught. She rested a hand over her chest, shock softening her face. Oh my, she whispered. You grew into a fine man. Do you know where she is? I asked again. She nodded slowly. She stayed with us for almost 2 years. She was fragile when she arrived, frightened of everything, even her own shadow. But she was gentle, hard-working, and she prayed for you every single night. She carried the loss of you like a wound she refused to let heal. My heart throbbed painfully. One day, the woman continued, she said she needed to leave. She said she couldn't spend the rest of her life hiding from the world or from what she had done. She wanted to become someone you wouldn't be ashamed of. I swallowed, my voice tight. Did she ever have more children? No, she said softly. She never allowed herself to. She feared she would fail again. I didn't realize I was crying until a tear slid down my jaw. She moved to a small town an hour from here, the woman said. Took a job at a community center. Quiet life, simple life. She still writes to us sometimes. Is she okay? I whispered. The woman hesitated. The pause was brief, but it felt like someone grabbing my heart with cold fingers. She's alive, she said carefully, but life hasn't been easy for her. Every muscle in my body tightened. Where is she? I asked again. This time she walked to a cabinet and took out a slip of paper with an address. She handed it to me like someone handing over a fragile truth. Before you go, she added, you need to understand something. She never forgave herself, not once, so whatever you're carrying, be gentle when you meet her. She's already been punished by her own heart. I nodded, unable to speak. I left the mission house with the paper clutched in my hand. The air outside felt heavy, like the world was preparing me for something I couldn't predict. I sat in my car for a long time, staring at the address, trying to imagine how it would feel to see the face of the woman who had given me life. Then I drove. The town was small, quiet, the kind of place with one main street, a bakery, a tired grocery store, and kids chasing each other barefoot. As I turned onto a narrow road lined with old trees, my pulse quickened. The house wasn't much, small, white, with a faded blue door and a patch of flowers growing unevenly in the front yard. I parked across the street and sat there watching the windows, wondering if she was inside, wondering if she would recognize something in me, wondering if I would recognize something in her. For a moment, I almost turned around. I almost drove away and pretended the truth wasn't clawing at my chest, but I hadn't come this far to run. I stepped out of the car. Each step toward the door felt heavier than the last. My heart hammered so loudly, I wondered if the whole street could hear it. When I reached the door, I lifted my hand but froze inches from the wood. Part of me hoped she wouldn't answer. Another part hoped she would run into my arms, and another part feared she might not want me at all. I finally knocked. Silence. I knocked again, softer this time. Footsteps. The door creaked open. A woman stood there, older now, lines of time etched into her face, her hair streaked with gray, her body slimmer, as if life had chipped pieces off her. But her eyes were the same as the ones in the photographs. Deep, brown, tired, beautiful, familiar. She stared at me. I stared at her. For a moment we didn't breathe. Then her hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes filled instantly. She whispered one word, one I had never heard from her lips but felt like I had waited my whole life to hear. Malik. My chest cracked open. I didn't know who moved first. Maybe she did. Maybe I did. All I remember is that suddenly her arms were around me, trembling, fragile, desperate, pulling me into an embrace that felt like coming home to a place I had never been. She cried against my shoulder, soft, broken sobs that came from a place deeper than pain. "I'm sorry," she kept saying. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for everything." I couldn't speak. I just held her. Held the woman who had given me life. Held the woman who had lost me. Held the woman I had been searching for since the moment I opened that wooden box. We stood in her doorway, both shaking, both crying, both trying to piece together 23 years of absence in a single embrace. And for the first time since discovering the truth, I felt my heart breathe. Inside her small house, everything felt quiet, almost sacred, like the air itself knew this moment had been waiting for decades. She guided me to a worn couch, her hands trembling as if she feared I might disappear if she let go for even a second. I sat, and she sat across from me, wiping tears that kept forming faster than she could catch them. She looked at me with awe, with guilt, with a kind of love so raw it made my throat ache. "I never thought I would see you again," she whispered. Her voice was fragile, but it carried a weight that pressed against my heart. I wanted to ask 1,000 questions. Why she left me, why she never came back, why she didn't fight for me. But the words felt heavy on my tongue, tangled with grief and anger and longing. I reached into my bag and placed the notebook on the table between us. She froze. Her breath caught, and when she reached for it, her fingers trembled as if she was touching a newborn again. She held it against her chest and closed her eyes. A tear escaped, falling onto the cracked cover. "I thought this was gone," she breathed. "I thought they threw it away." "They kept it," I said quietly, "and now it's mine." She nodded slowly, swallowing hard. "It was all I had left of you." The room felt smaller suddenly, heavy with memories I didn't have but could almost feel. "I need to hear the truth," I said gently. "All of it." She looked down at her hands, thin, shaking, older than they should have looked, and took a deep breath. "I was young," she began. "Too young, and too trusting." She told me how she met my biological father at a bus station, how he charmed her with big promises, how she believed him, how he disappeared the moment she told him she was pregnant. She worked where she could, cleaning houses, doing laundry for neighbors, sewing clothes late into the night. She tried to keep me fed, tried to keep a roof over our heads. "But I was drowning," she said softly, "and every day I looked at your face and told myself I could do better, that I would, but I had no help. And the walls kept closing in." Her voice broke, but she continued. "When I was evicted, I walked the streets with you in my arms for hours. I didn't know where to go. I was hungry. You were hungry. I couldn't bear it." She paused, choking on the memory. "I heard of a woman, your adoptive mother, who helped people. They said she had a kind heart, that she wouldn't turn away a mother in need. And she didn't. She opened her door. She fed me. She fed you. She gave us a bed when we had nothing." She smiled through tears. "Your mother, she was goodness itself. I don't know how I would have survived without her." I felt a lump in my throat. Hearing her speak about the woman who raised me, her tenderness, her warmth, made my heart twist painfully. "And then?" I asked. She looked down. "And then my past found me." A shadow crossed her face. "The people who drove me out before, they came looking for me again. I was terrified. I thought they would hurt you. So I left with you before dawn without telling anyone. I thought maybe I could start fresh somewhere else." She shook her head slowly. "But life doesn't care about what you hope. The place I went was worse. I had no job, no one to trust, no home. I tried to take care of you, but I kept failing. One night, you were sick, crying, burning with fever, and I had no money for medicine." Her lips quivered. "I went back. I walked miles with you in my arms and left you at their door, because I believed, stupidly believed, they could give you more than I ever could." She looked up at me, and the grief in her eyes was so deep it felt ancient. "When I walked away from that house, something inside me died. I didn't speak, couldn't speak. My throat felt too tight. I kept visiting at first," she whispered. "Your mother always let me in. She always gave me tea. She never judged me. She told me I could rebuild my life and return for you, that it wasn't too late. But I could see it in your eyes. You were happier with them, healthier, safer. You recognized her laugh. You reached for her before you reached for me. Her voice cracked, and I knew I had already lost you. She covered her face with both hands, sobbing quietly. I stopped visiting because every goodbye broke me, and because I didn't want you to grow up confused, torn between two mothers. They could give you everything. I could barely give you hope. For a long time, I sat there in silence, letting her words sink into me like stones sinking into water. The pain, the fear, the impossible decision she made. It hurt. It hurt deeply, but it also made sense in a way I wasn't prepared for. You should have come back, I finally whispered. She nodded, tears streaming. I know, I punished myself for 23 years because of that. I looked at her again, really looked at her. The tired eyes, the fragile hands, the quiet strength beneath her regret. She wasn't a ghost anymore. She was a woman, flawed, wounded, human. I'm not here to punish you, I said softly. I'm here because I needed to know. She exhaled shakily, something loosening in her body as if she had been holding guilt like a breath for too long. I never stopped loving you, she whispered. The words hit me like sunlight after a long storm. I reached across the table and took her hand. She flinched at first, surprised, but then held on tightly, her tears falling freely. I don't know how to do this, I said. I don't know how to suddenly have two mothers. I don't know how to forgive or forget. You don't need to, she said through tears. Just let me know you. That's enough. We sat like that for a long time, holding hands across the table. Two lives that had been separated by fear and silence finally touching at last. Later, she showed me a small wooden box she kept hidden beneath her bed. Inside were pieces of a past she had never let go of. A lock of my baby hair, a tiny sock, a faded photograph of her holding me the day I was born. Things she had carried like a wound, and a prayer. Then she said something I wasn't prepared for. Malik, there is something else, something you must know. I froze. Her voice trembled. You were not given up voluntarily. Not entirely. Someone pushed me. Someone pressured me to leave you. Someone threatened me. Her eyes filled with fear as she whispered the name. A name I recognized. A name that ripped open a new wound inside me. And in that moment, I knew the truth was far from over. It was darker, deeper, and far more dangerous than I had imagined. When she spoke that name, it was like the room tilted. A rush of heat shot through my chest, followed by something cold and sharp sinking into my spine. I stared at her, unsure if I had heard correctly. You said, who? She closed her eyes, trembling. Your adoptive father. The air vanished from my lungs. My father. The man who taught me how to fix a flat tire, how to tie a tie, how to never run from responsibility, even when life treated you unfairly. The man who stood at my mother's graveside with shaking shoulders. The man I had always believed was the anchor of our family. He threatened you, I whispered. She nodded slowly. The first time I left you at their home, I came back a week later. Desperate, ashamed, ready to take you back. Your mother, God bless her soul, she wanted to help me. She told me we could arrange something, even if it meant I would see you regularly. She swallowed hard, her voice growing weaker. But your father? He said no. My heart hammered against my ribs. He told me I was unstable, she continued, that I didn't deserve you, that I would ruin your future. He said you were better off without me, and if I tried to claim you again, he would report me for abandonment and ensure I never saw you again. My hands curled into fists. He said if I truly loved you, I would disappear. My breath shook. Anger, confusion, betrayal, they tangled inside me until I couldn't tell where one emotion ended and another began. But my mother, I whispered. She would never. She cried, the woman said. She begged him to reconsider, but she was afraid too. He was the head of the house, and at that time, she didn't have the strength to fight him. My knees felt weak. I thought of the quiet strength my adoptive mother always carried, the soft way she soothed me, The way she tried to tell me the truth at the end, the guilt in her handwriting. How much had she wanted to say? How much had she been forced to bury? I pressed my hands against my face. My entire life I had seen my father as unbreakable. Now I was finding the cracks, dark, thin lines running through the foundation he had forced everyone to trust. I looked at the woman sitting across from me, my biological mother, her shoulders small, her eyes wet, her hands trembling. She wasn't lying. There was no gain in lying. The truth was written in her face. "Why didn't you fight him?" I asked, though it sounded more like I was asking myself. "Because I had nothing," she whispered, "and he had everything." Silence fell over us like dust settling after an explosion. Eventually, she reached out and touched my hand again. "You have every right to hate me," she said, "and to hate him, and to grieve her, but you also have a right to choose what comes next." I nodded slowly, though my heart still pulsed with confusion. "Do you want to see him?" she asked. I didn't know. Part of me wanted to confront him immediately, to demand why he had stolen 23 years of truth from me. Another part feared what I would see when I looked into the eyes of the man I once called father. I left her house at dusk. The sky was streaked with orange, bleeding into purple. The drive back was a blur. Lights, trees, and memories passing by the window without form. When I reached home, my father was in the backyard, sitting alone in the dark as if waiting for something he didn't know how to face. He looked up when I approached. "You found her," he said quietly. "I did." He nodded slowly. "I knew you would." Instead of shouting, I stood there in silence for a moment, letting the weight of everything press down between us. "Why did you do it?" I finally asked. His jaw tightened. He rubbed his palms together slowly. "Because I was scared," he said. "Because I loved you. Because I didn't trust she could give you what you deserved." "That wasn't your choice," I said, my voice trembling. He looked away. "Maybe not. But I made it anyway." "You threatened her," I said, the words trembling with anger. He didn't deny it. His voice cracked. "I wanted stability. For you, for your mother. I thought that woman would take you away. I thought she'd break your life apart." "You broke it," I said. "You broke her. You broke the truth. And you broke me." He covered his face with his hands. His shoulders shook. "I know," he whispered. "And I have lived with that guilt every day. Your mother never forgave me. She stayed, but she never forgave me. And I have punished myself quietly in ways you'll never understand." We sat in silence. Two men, one young, one aging, both wounded by the same truth, but in different ways. "I can't undo what I did," he said softly. "I can only hope you don't let it destroy you." I looked at him, really looked at him. A flawed man. A frightened man. A man who loved fiercely but made choices that caused deep harm. A man who believed he was protecting me but instead wrote a lie over my entire life. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I said truthfully. He nodded. "I don't expect you to. But I'm not walking away from this family," I added. "Not from the people who cared for me. Not from the memories. Not from who I became." Tears rolled down his cheeks. "You're a better man than me," he whispered. "No," I said, "but I'm trying to be." In the weeks that followed, my life became something new, something fragile, something in between. I visited my biological mother often. We talked for hours, sharing stories, filling empty spaces with laughter and tears. I told her about my childhood. She told me about the years she spent searching for herself. I learned her voice, her smile, her silence, and each time I left, I felt a piece of myself return, something I didn't even know was missing. My father and I moved cautiously around each other. Sometimes we spoke, sometimes we didn't. Sometimes he tried to apologize, and sometimes I couldn't bear to listen. Healing wasn't a straight line. It twisted, it looped. Some days I felt strong, some days I felt broken, but I kept going. And one afternoon, something unexpected happened. My biological mother knocked on our door. My father answered. They froze. Two lives that once collided in pain, now standing face to face. She looked at him, not with anger, but with a quiet strength that made me proud. "You hurt me," she said simply, "but I'm done living under that hurt." He bowed his head. "I'm sorry," he whispered. She nodded, not in forgiveness, but in acknowledgement. And somehow, that was enough. Sometimes life doesn't give us perfect endings. It gives us honest ones. And honesty, I learned, is a kind of healing too. If you've walked through family secrets, if you've carried truths too heavy for silence, you're not alone. Stories like mine exist all around us. And if this one touched something in you, feel free to share your experience. Your voice might help someone else find theirs. Thank you for walking through this storm with me. And if you want to hear more stories like this, raw, human, real, you're welcome to stay with us here on the channel. Because sometimes the truth hurts, but it can also set you free.